Good afternoon, everybody. This is another edition of the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Lots of stuff we're going to get into today. Just a reminder, if you're interested and you want to be part of the program, please comment on the Facebook Live or Periscope feed. Like I said, a lot of stuff we're going to get into. We're going to touch on football, baseball, basketball, a little bit on unifying America, which, by the way, is completely going in the opposite direction. But I'm not going to get too much into it right now. But the bottom line is we're looking at the divided states of America as we know it. We're looking at the great Athens of Greece, the ancient Rome, the great empires, the Ottoman Empire. If you go back in your world history and you're watching one of the great countries and nations that have ever existed in this country crumble right before our eyes, and there's nobody to blame for this but the people of this country. The United States of America, its people, is responsible for its own demise, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. First thing I wanted to talk about today is Monday Night Football is obviously set up on ESPN. They've been on ESPN for a while, obviously enjoyed the great success of Monday Night Football and their ABC. And one thing that allowed for its success wasn't necessarily the product on the field, wasn't necessarily the sport. The National Football League, if you remember, in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, was pretty much set up as an up-and-coming league, but certainly didn't have anywhere near the fanfare that it has right now. Monday Night Football was just an idea that ABC had come up with to say, hey, get a game on another day of the week, and maybe it could draw a little more attention to it. The games being played on Sunday, they were doing okay, but we got to keep reminding ourselves the state of the National Football League in the late 1960s and the early 1970s was nothing along the lines of what it is right now. So you have an increased product, which obviously draws ridiculous revenue like we've never seen before. There's not a sport out there in the world that draws the amount of money, whether it's from ticket sales, from its jersey sales, what it does on gambling and fantasy football. It's ridiculous, the amount of revenue that the National Football League draws in. Yet you look at a game, which, by the way, is partially responsible for the National Football League being what it is today. The success of Monday Night Football with Don Meredith and Frank Gifford and Howard Cosell made it the successful industry that it is right now. It drew more people to it, made it an event. Monday Night Football was a bigger deal than football on a day of Sunday. And remember, we think of, Sunday, you go to church. You spend your time with your religious beliefs. You spend time at home with your family, and you watch football. As we have that kind of put in our minds, as if it's something that, is just understood. You talk about things that are American, like, apple pie and the blues. You talk about things that are about Sunday. Sunday is about going to church. Sunday is about spending time with your family, and Sunday is about the National Football League. But Sunday football on Sunday, whether it's in the afternoon or in the evening, would not have become what it was if it wasn't for Monday Night Football. And the people that were responsible for that, whether it was Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, Frank Gifford, the crew down at ABC, they made it out to be what it is right now. And the sad thing about it is you look at Monday Night Football as it's transitioned to ESPN, which, by the way, is owned by ABC. So you're not talking about a huge transition from one station to another. It's going from, Channel 7 in most people's networks to cable television, which obviously we know what cable has become. When Monday Night Football, started with its prominence in the early 1970s, there was no cable. So we get it. As we're developing and we're kind of, getting used to time as we know it, we look at Monday Night Football, it isn't so much of a problem that it's on a cable station. It isn't even a problem that it's ESPN that's carrying Monday Night Football, during the year, every single year now. The problem is they don't have the draw to it. Outside of the football that you see on the field, outside of, perhaps getting a solid Monday Night Football game, whether it's the Patriots, whether it's a good in-division rivalry, let's say in the NFC East, whether you have two really good teams competing with each other. If it's not for that, there's no draw to it whatsoever. Monday Night Football has fallen ridiculously from grace over the last several years. And it's not just with the transition to ESPN. It's with the games not meaning much of anything, but most importantly, going back to the days of ABC hosting Monday Night Football, there is no draw to it other than the action that you'd see on the field. And a lot of it has to do with the broadcast pairings and the broadcast teams. We've watched John Gruden over the last couple of years. Of course, John Gruden is heading off to coach the Oakland Raiders again, and of course coach them when they head to Las Vegas, which we definitely got to talk about Las Vegas in a little bit. But that dynamic broadcasting team, I got to be honest, has taken has gone a long way from the days of Don Meredith and Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford, and has certainly gone a long ways even from the days of Al Michaels, Frank Gifford, and Dan Dierdorf. I mean, at least at that point, there was enough interaction between the two of them. The fact that they could get into something, whether it's on the field, whether it's something that Dierdorf said, whether it's something that brought your eyes to it that Frank Gifford mentioned. Al Michaels, who obviously is one of the greatest broadcasters of all time. He could call a snail race and still draw some attention to it. The problem is right now in 2017 going into 2018, as this football season comes up, what is the draw that ESPN has for its team? Jason Witten retires, is coming into the broadcast booth. A lot of attention was drawn to Tony Romo, who I thought did a pretty good job doing the games last year on CBS. But now, there is no controversy. There is nobody that's there. And, I hate to throw random names out there, but, Dennis Miller, who did Monday Night Football for a series of years. And I understood why you brought a guy that had no ties to football. You had a guy that was known for being a comedian. Because you know what? He might create that what is he going to say next type of show. You think of what Keith Hernandez does with the New York Mets and their broadcast. He's showing you something on his finger and he cut himself shaving. He ends up flipping the crowd to bird. Obviously unintentional, but, knowing that it's Keith Hernandez, you got to be at the edge of your seats for anything that this guy might say or do at any given moment. Monday Night Football misses that right now. And you know what? The NFL may not miss Monday Night Football. It's sitting here with its ratings. Roger Goodell, as the commissioner, is talking about the sport being the most profitable sport in the history of professional sports. I get it. It may not even be an issue to Roger Goodell. It may not be an issue to the fans. The fans can probably care less about Monday Night Football, and if you look at the ratings, it's obvious that they do. But Monday Night Football was something that built the sport into what it is today. And anybody that follows football and enjoys the product that they see on the field, gambles on it, whether it's through your fantasy football or your regular bets that you put, your little football pools that you got together every single week in your office, you got to thank Monday Night Football for bringing the sport out to what it is, bringing the attention to the sport to what it is today. And if you look at Howard Cosell, and he may not have known a ton about football, but he was a draw. He drew people in there because you knew he wasn't going to take any shit from anybody. He wasn't going to take anything from the program and director if he didn't want. He was going to say what he wanted to say. If Don Meredith said something he didn't like, he was going to jab at him a little bit, calling him Dandy Don. Talking about Frank Gifford as beloved as he was. And obviously, all of them rest in peace. Because broadcasting is missing that element. And if you're watching your games, whether it's on CBS or Fox, you're just watching your regular regional, play-by-play guy paired together with some ex-football player. And the broadcast is what's suffering. The action on the field could be good. It could be a great game. And you know what? You could have anybody call it and it would still be a great game. But that draw that exists when you're watching your typical Monday Night Football broadcast is not there. And ESPN is doing everything they can. You know, they're bringing this guy over from college football, Joe Tessitore, and they're going to bring in a third, wheel to it. Jason Witten, of course, is going to be there. Maybe it works out. Maybe there's some chemistry there. But I'll tell you, the one thing that Monday Night Football is missing is that what-if factor. That what are they going to say next factor. And it's sad. Because I tell you, you look at what brought the sport to what it is. And sure, some of it had to do with the talented players. And if you watch the great football players in the 70s and the 80s and, of course, the 90s, as it's transitioned into the game that we see today, the players deserve some of the credit. But without the draw of the late 1960s and early 1970s and ABC's idea to play football on Monday night and put together a diverse broadcasting crew, a former player in Frank Gifford. Originally, it was Keith Jackson, and they were waiting for Gifford to get out of his contract. Don Meredith was there, and they balanced it all out in a weird way. And it may not even make sense to say balancing out because Howard Cosell was such a divisive figure. While he was a successful figure, and he drew the interest from the public like nobody had ever drawn the interest from the public before. But he created an identity in the National Football League that had not been seen before. And we've watched over the last several years, whether it was Cosell eventually being let out of Monday Night Football. And, of course, his remarks on it, Alvin Garrett, which today, if somebody made that comment, they would have been fired. But you understood that it was that you never know what the guy is going to say. Howard Cosell, right now, or actually you could reverse it and say Keith Hernandez a couple weeks ago in a Mets game in San Diego had his Howard Cosell moment. And it was accepted because it was Keith Hernandez. Keith Hernandez, you knew, was literally trying to show his broadcast partner, Gary Cohen, how he cut himself shaving on his finger and ends up flipping a bird to the camera. He didn't say, hey, I'm going to flip the bird to the camera. It's just the way it came out. And you knew that it was epic television gold because he didn't mean to do it. He didn't have to prepare an apology afterwards. Just going back to 1983 in that Washington Redskins game. And he's talking about Alvin Garrett running down the sidelines. And he's describing him in a way where a lot of people would take as being offensive. And of course, in a society that we live in today, would absolutely be taken as offensive. But anybody that knew anything about football, anybody that knew anything about Howard Cosell, whether you loved him or you hated him, you understood that the man did not mean his comment as a racist comment. Yes, it was a bad moment for him. It was a moment that eventually got him taken off the Monday Night Football broadcast. But it was accepted then, not because there was any sort of racial undertone meant by the comment that he made about the Washington Redskins wide receiver. But it was because you had a man that didn't necessarily have a filter, but also you knew that he was capable of saying anything at any moment. And if you look at Monday Night Football as it exists right now, the one thing that it's missing is that drama factor, that thought that one of the broadcasters could say anything at any moment and would captivate the audience to want to know what he's going to say next. And if ESPN wants to make anything out of Monday Night Football, which, by the way, as the years go by, it's becoming more and more of a forgotten asset of the game. And you're almost getting to a point where you're saying, hey, what is the difference between Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football? I think we could all agree that having games on Thursday night is oversaturating a sport, giving us a little too much. But who would have thought in 2018, the young sports fan, the young football fan that's following the game for the first time may not be able to decipher from an impact standpoint the difference between Thursday night football and Monday night football. And hopefully if you don't, you ask your parents, or in some cases even ask your grandparents. Ask those that have followed football for years upon years, and they'll tell you what Monday Night Football meant to the National Football League. Now maybe you could grab yourself your Joe, whatever, Tessitone or whatever the guy's name is from college football. Now he's got a dynamic personality. Maybe he draws some attention to it. Maybe you can listen to some of his calls and say, hey, this guy can really do it. Maybe Jason Witten, can come up and maybe, no pun intended, throw some wit into the broadcast. Maybe give you a little something that you can say, hey, you know what? I want to listen to Monday Night Football because I want to know what Jason Witten's going to say next. It's pretty doubtful, though. And it's unfortunate because we watched the destruction of Monday Night Football as it exists in the National Football League before our eyes. And I miss it. I miss it when Monday Night Football used to be the draw, not just for the matchup on a football field with the players that are playing, but the dynamic broadcasting team. And they haven't had a dynamic broadcasting team on Monday Night Football since Al Michaels, Frank Gifford, and Dan Dierdorf. And you know what? Even those guys were a shell of what Gifford, Howard Cosell, and Don Meredith used to be. Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. Happy to be with you, 7th day of May 2018. Please feel free to comment on your Periscope feed or Facebook Live. You can do it on demand on YouTube as well, but understand that I'm not quite going to be able to get to it until I process the program afterwards. But, wanted to talk a little bit about, the things that are going on in baseball. And if you follow it from a local front, if you're a New York sports fan, if you're a Yankees fan or a Mets fan, you're seeing the teams obviously go in completely different directions. You got the Yankees who can't seem to lose a game. They look like the 98 Yankees, which is, can't believe it's 20 years ago, already, the 98 Yankees. But you got what's going on, of course, with the New York Mets. And the unfortunate thing that, 11-1 start, they look like a shell of the team that they used to be. And my question is, and we always get into this, when a team's going bad, as fans, as people that cover the game, we want to blame somebody. And you don't necessarily know who to blame. You got a situation with the Mets where they just brought in a new manager, so anybody that's blaming a manager, saying the Mets will be a great baseball team, will be an absolute contender for the National League pennant if they had a different manager, I just don't know where to go with this conversation if this is the way you feel. You start to say, hey, where's the accountability? Is the accountability on the players? And you could certainly look at the fact that they have a series of players, a lot of players, even when they were playing well. They have a lot of players that were underperforming. And I get it. At some point, the guys are going to have to hit. At some point, the Mets pitchers, for the exception of Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom, have to go out there and give you a legitimate performance. At some point, they're going to have to come up with a big hit in a big spot. At some point, you're going to have to see something out of a Michael Conforto or an Ahmed Rosario or even some of the veterans like a Jay Bruce or an Adrian Gonzalez. They have an anemic catcher position, which, you can't predict. And your two starting catchers are both going to get hurt. But at some point, you have to address the fact that you have two guys that are catching right now and are performing what you would put the equivalent of a black hole in your lineup. You got to bat the pitcher. There's no designated hitter. You got a catching tandem that neither of them can hit whatsoever. And you have a shortstop that's struggling. So you have a 7, 8, 9 in your lineup that are giving you absolutely nothing. You're hoping that the first 6 batters in your lineup, when they come up, they're going to be able to provide you something. And if they're not able to provide you something, you're taking the next inning off. So how much of that does get put on the general manager to do something about it? And I know the Mets have been active over the last week. They designated Matt Harvey for assignment, and if you listened to me last week talk about it, you understand that it was something that was probably inevitable, something that was coming, something at some point you knew was eventually going to come and rear its ugly head. If Matt Harvey can't make it into the starting rotation, you're going to try him in a bullpen. If Matt Harvey can't make it in the bullpen, at some point, you're going to have to make a decision. Does he go to the minors? Do you offer him the chance to work out his kinks in the minor leagues? And if the guy is too thick-headed to see that that's probably the best option for him at this given moment, you give the guy his release and replace him with somebody that is going to give you some value. Let's be serious. If you watched Matt Harvey pitch in relief the 4 times he went out there this year, he didn't give the Mets a chance to win. He was pitching worse than he did as a starter for them. So it's a business. The Mets, just like any other baseball team, just like any other professional sports team, need to make sure that every single one of their roster spots are occupied by somebody that has the ability to give you a good chance to win. And for those that don't, they need to be removed from the roster and replaced by somebody that can. So the Mets got off to a good start with this. They cut Harvey. You can wait over the next couple days and see if they work out a trade with somebody else, but more than likely, they're going to grant him his release. He's going to sign with some other team, maybe to a major league contract, and he's going to see if he's got something left. We'll see how that ends up turning out. But the Mets got to continue to move from here. And I understand that we're sitting here in the first week of May. I'm not ready to take your entire roster and cut everybody. But at some point, as a general manager, Sandy Alderson has to say, listen, there has to be some sort of sense of urgency for what's going on with this team right now. They're on a free fall. They just lost all 6 games on a homestand. They're getting ready to go on the road to Cincinnati, where they've had some success, to Philadelphia, where they've had some success. But the one thing that's going to catch you there in Philadelphia is a good baseball team that, if the Mets aren't going to bring it, they're going to kick the Mets' ass, just like the Braves and the Rockies did this past week. And if you're not going to come into these games with a sense of urgency, not just from the manager, not just from the players, but from the front office, to look at these upcoming games and say that it is up to them right now to make a change, to change the product that's on the field, to make sure they got 25 guys on that roster that absolutely give them the best chance to win, they're going to continue to free fall. And the first thing would be to address the catching situation right now. And you can hear Sandy Alderson talk and say that, hey, there's nobody that you could trade for, or there's nobody that can be picked up on free agency that can give them a better chance to win than the 2 catchers they've got. Sandy, have you watched the 2 catchers that you got play? Have you watched Jose Lobaton and Tomas Nido try to hit? One guy's hitting 139. The other guy's hitting 152. I'm pretty sure you could hit free agency and find somebody that could do better than hit 139 or 152. You could trade for a catcher that could do better than hitting 139 or 152. You're going to get to a certain point, and I don't know what type of pulse the Mets ownership has on what's going on. I don't know how much they're even involved in the baseball operations department right now. I don't know how much autonomy that Sandy Alderson has. I know he took a little bit of a shot when Omar Minaya, the Mets' previous general manager, was brought in there to work with him in player development. I know that wasn't necessarily a vote of confidence. And I'm not saying it's time for the Mets to change general managers or maybe make changes in the baseball operations department. But Sandy Alderson should be held accountable for everything that's going on right now and everything that will go on over the course of the rest of the season. And if that doesn't change, it should be on him. Not on the coaches, not on the manager, not on any of the players, but the guy that's assembling the roster and the guy that's responsible for the players that are on that roster. And if Sandy Alderson can't see that the Mets need to make some sort of upgrade at catcher, or at the very least, some sort of change, bring in somebody else, whether it's a Miguel Montero. Ryan Hanigan just signed a deal with the San Francisco Giants. The Giants have 2 catchers, one of them who's an MVP. They found the need to bring in Ryan Hanigan. Tell me Ryan Hanigan can't hit better than 139 or 152? Miguel Montero. I remember a half a dozen years ago, was hitting home runs at Citi Field that I'd never seen anybody hit before. I understand this guy has, been through the major leagues. He's struggled, whether it's, public relations with the Cubs, not getting along with his teammates. He's been, did a bad job with the Blue Jays last year, couldn't hold on to a roster spot with the Washington Nationals. But you tell me this, that this guy isn't worth a chance, that he might be a little better than what the Mets are putting out there every day. And now it's time, whether it's bringing up Dominic Smith or Peter Alonso to play first base, whether Jay Bruce is, he's struggling himself, but if he's going to be playing first base every day, Brandon Nimmo and Juan Lagares, maybe it's time to see them a little more regularly. It's time to make some changes. Maybe take your last shot look at Jose Reyes, which we all understand is a diminished player. Anybody that's watching a New York Mets game knows that this isn't the same guy that he was 10 years ago. And maybe with Ahmed Rosario struggling, you run Reyes out there for 2 out of 3 games, or maybe let him play a whole series and see if he could give you any spark. He's still a little dangerous on the bases. He can hit a little bit, though he struggled this year. And you know what? If in this time, in a 3-game stretch or a 6-game stretch, Jose Reyes can't show any sort of consistency, he's the next guy you got to cut. With all due respect to Jose Reyes, and I'll tell you, he's still one of my favorite Mets that I've seen in my lifetime. But he's not the same player. And the Mets need to put him out there, see if he can catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle. And if not, it's time to let him go. It's time to replace him on a roster with somebody that can still play this game. Adrian Gonzalez, he had a rough year last year. He struggled. I get it. I understand that, the back injuries that he had last year with the Los Angeles Dodgers, he's obviously a diminished player. If he can't get anything going offensively, Jay Bruce has got to be playing there. Wilmer Flores has got to be playing there. And you know what? If Adrian Gonzalez is not showing that he is worthy of a roster spot amongst these 25 players that the Mets have assembled, it's time to bring up Dominic Smith. It might even be time to bring up Peter Alonso if he's past Smith on the Mets depth charts. But it's up to the front office right now. It's not on Mickey Callaway. It's not on the players that are on the field. Sure, the players on the field got to play better. And the guys that have baseball cards that are a little bit better than the performance they've seen on the field in 2018 need to step up their game, absolutely. But right now it's on the general manager. And if Sandy Alderson isn't willing to make any sort of tinkering with this roster, isn't willing to bring in a catcher that is a better hitter than 139 or 152, if he's not willing to explore the market to make a trade, to make this team better in the glaring holes that we're seeing day in and day out, he's the one that needs to be held accountable. And then you go on the other side and you watch the New York Yankees, who can't even lose a game if they want to. The New York Yankees can't even lose if they try. They have so many things clicking. They throw out a kid yesterday that's making his first start of the season. He throws 6 no-hit innings and strikes out 9 batters. Gleyber Torres couldn't make the team in spring training because he was off to a slow start. Comes up hitting walk-off homers. Miguel Andujar, a guy who the Yankees couldn't wait to trade for Brandon Drury and sign Neil Walker because they didn't think he was ready yet, is coming up with big hit after big hit. All of this without their big acquisition of Giancarlo Stanton struggling. At this point, the Yankees are so good they don't even need Stanton. For everybody that was talking about the Yankees, they won as many games as they lost. They were off to a little bit of a rough start. They weren't dominating the American League. How do you feel now? How do you feel about that same team that you were bashing in the first week of the season? As we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show, once again, John Pielli with you. You can comment if you want on Periscope. I believe Facebook Live is shut off again. We'll have to work on the technical issues that are going on with that. And obviously, the Pass Ball Show is known for its technical issues. Moving on, I wanted to talk a little NBA. And I tell you, talk about something that we hyped up to be so interesting, and I'm responsible for it too. So is everybody that talks in radio, everybody that does TV, everybody that's gotten the NBA playoffs, set them up to be, probably something a lot bigger than it's really become. We spent the time talking about the Toronto Raptors with the 1 seed in the East. We talked about the Houston Rockets being the 1 seed in the West. We talked about, the NBA as it's constructed in a postseason this year being something completely different than what we've seen over the last 3 years. And what have we seen over the last 3 years? We've seen the Golden State Warriors run roughshod over the West and be the likely favorites to win the whole thing. We've talked about the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron James, taking that team to the finals, probably, taking a team good enough maybe to get to the finals, but not good enough to be on the same court as the Golden State Warriors. And what did we hype ourselves up with this year? We talked about Toronto winning the East. We talked about Toronto probably being the best team in that conference. Maybe, they could beat Boston. Maybe they could beat Cleveland. And we see as they're sitting there down 3-0 with Game 4 in Cleveland. We talked about the Boston Celtics and Gordon Hayward and Kyrie Irving and those guys being hurt. And because they were hurt, that was going to open up an opportunity for a team like the Philadelphia 76ers. The young stars with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid ready to take this team through the conference. And what we thought was a weak Eastern Conference, we thought this was going to be a pretty good year for the Philadelphia 76ers to maybe represent that conference in the finals. And you know what? I'll tell you, the fact that there's a chance that exists, I'll tell you that anything can happen. Maybe the 76ers, maybe the Raptors could go out there and win 4 straight against the Celtics and the Cavaliers. Who, by the way, the Celtics and the Cavaliers are basically the Eastern Conference equivalent of the Golden State Warriors. Another year, same old thing. And we talked about it ad nauseum, how the Sixers had a pretty good chance, how the Raptors had a pretty good chance, how the Miami Heat and the Indiana Pacers and even the Milwaukee Bucks had a puncher's chance of taking out one of these big teams in the first round. It didn't happen. And we're watching the second round, and the 76ers and the Raptors up to this point have been laying an egg. The Raptors in particular should be ashamed of themselves. This is a team that has played very well over the last couple of years, has been good enough to be a playoff team, has been a good enough team to win the Atlantic Division. Good enough team to win that division because the rest of the division stinks. And they're sitting there right now, 1 game away from being eliminated, because they looked on that other bench and they saw LeBron James. And LeBron James deserves a ton of credit. He's one of the greatest players that I've ever seen. And you can make a case that he may be better than Jordan, because Jordan had other players. Jordan had much better role players. Jordan had Scottie Pippen. Who is LeBron James, Scottie Pippen? Even going back to the days with the Heat. Was Dwayne Wade as good as Scottie Pippen? Maybe Wade was better than Scottie Pippen before LeBron got there, but certainly not when LeBron got there. So you look at the Cavaliers, and I tell you, I root for the Cavaliers. I'd like to see them win. But I tell you, I'm tired of the Warriors Cavs in the finals every year. If this happens for 4 straight years. And I thought we were promised something different. I thought we were looking at something different. You got all these talking heads. Can't wait to hear the sound of their own voice trying to sell me on there being something different in the NBA this year. Looking at the Houston Rockets, and I keep saying this, and I'll say this, and I'll blue in the face. I'll believe in the Houston Rockets when James Harden and Chris Paul and Mike D'Antoni, between the 3 of them, win a big series. And them finishing off the Utah Jazz getting to the Western Conference Finals is not cutting it. Show me that they can beat the Golden State Warriors, because that's what it's going to have to come to. Show me that they could get to the NBA Finals themselves And until they do that, I got no belief in James Harden. I got no belief in Chris Paul. I got no belief in Mike D'Antoni. Because between the three of them, they have not won a big basketball series. And maybe we'll see it this year. If they can just finish off the Jazz, which I think they'll have no problem doing, they're going to be underdogs. Even though they'll have a home court advantage, they'll have the chance to do it. And let's say the Eastern Conference series go the way that they're expected to right now with both teams, Boston and Cleveland, up 3-0. Let's see if Boston can get over the hump. Because at least with a Boston Golden State NBA Finals, it'll be a little interesting. It'll be something different. That's what I've wanted to see for the longest time. Just something different. And I'd like to see LeBron James maybe beat this Golden State Warriors team by himself, which he may very well have to do if that team could somehow get to the finals. But I look at the Boston Celtics and I think, especially with guys like, Tatum, and Horford, I think they got a very solid team there. One in which should be able to, on paper at least, beat this Cleveland team. And I think for the first time in a couple of years, you could say that the Boston Celtics are actually the favorites to win the Eastern Conference. And of course, assuming they finish off Philadelphia, whether it's tonight or in game, 5 or 6. Cavaliers, same thing, either tonight or, down the road. Assuming that it's going to be a Boston-Cleveland Eastern Conference final, which, by the way, is a big disappointment. And I'm disappointed because I fed in to the media telling me that it was going to be a different NBA playoffs this year. And up to this point, it's not. Up until this point, it's Golden State against either Boston or Cleveland. And even if Boston beats the Cavs in Eastern Conference Finals, tell me who's surprised. Tell me who's shocked. Tell me what team is coming out of that conference that's going to have a legitimate chance to beat the Golden State Warriors. And as excited as I was when I watched the first round of the playoffs, and I watched the Milwaukee Bucks team almost beat the number 1 seeded Toronto Raptors, which to me that would have been interesting. You had the Cleveland Cavaliers go to 7 games against the Indiana Pacers. If the Pacers had beat them, it would have been interesting. You had the Boston Celtics go to 7 games. And at some point, I was hoping, man, can one of these other teams flip the switch? Can one of these other teams beat the favorites? And at least make this something interesting. At least make me want to tune into the television and want to know a little more about these teams that haven't gotten a lot of attention in the national media. But it's going to be the same old, same old. Boston, Cleveland, Eastern Conference Final. The NBA Finals, like I said, even if it's Boston against Golden State, it's kind of anticlimactic. Disappointment because I've seen a lot of a shift in the talent in the NBA. It's becoming more diverse. It's becoming more interesting because the talent isn't as top-heavy as it was when the season started. The Greek Freak is something worth watching. Anthony Davis is something worth watching. And I tell you, if I'm the New Orleans Pelicans, you got a lot to be proud of. You got a team that doesn't have its second best player, or maybe his 1A, in Boogie Cousins. He comes back next year. They got Rondo. They got a very good team there. A team that I think has enough talent that can make a shot in a Western Conference. But right now, it's the same old, same old. Once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show, of course brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. Now, you have the Vegas Golden Knights, an expansion team in the National Hockey League, about to play in the Western Conference Finals in its first season. And yes, it's been mentioned. Will be mentioned again. Will be probably talked to ad nauseum throughout the Western Conference Finals in the National Hockey League Stanley Cup playoffs. But we're looking at something historic here. We're looking at Las Vegas, the city who has finally gotten its first professional sports franchise. A region which we thought, because it's the king of gambling, it's the king of the casinos, it's the king of sports table betting, we thought it was never going to get a sports franchise. Finally does. And its first sports franchise, not just being an expansion team, but being its first sports franchise in the history of that city on a professional level, in a major sport. They have a chance to win the entire thing. And by getting to your conference finals, whether it's against Nashville, whether it's against Winnipeg, which Winnipeg has a chance to win that series tonight, they'll have a chance to get to the finals. A major sports finals in the first year as an expansion team, which is something we haven't seen in all of sports. But like I said, I'm doubling down on this, saying the fact that not only is this a new sports franchise in the National Hockey League, an expansion team in hockey, what we're looking at right now is a team that in the major sports that is having a franchise for the first time in the history of its sport, of its city, has a chance to win the entire thing. And I tell you, that's something that intrigues me as a sports fan, and it's something that I'll tell you I'm rooting for. Go Golden Knights. I want to see them not only make it to the Western Conference Finals, but I want to see them win the entire thing. I want them to win a Stanley Cup in their first season. It will be absolutely interesting to listen to and watch and see. But I tell you, you look at baseball, whether it was the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2001 in its fourth season, the Miami Marlins, who were the Florida Marlins, winning a World Series in their fourth season in 1997. We have not seen an expansion team have as much success in its first year, and a lot of it has to do with the way the NHL catered its draft. They gave the Vegas Golden Knights a chance to build themselves a winner right away if they wanted to. And it's interesting to see in Major League Baseball as they get set to perhaps announce that there's going to be 2 new expansion teams, as Commissioner Rob Manfred wants Major League Baseball to expand from 30 to 32 teams. Are they getting a team in Vegas? Does Montreal get its team back? Does Portland, Oregon get a team? Does Nashville get a team? I think in all odds, those are probably the 4 likeliest destinations for a new Major League Baseball team. But do they get the opportunity to build on the fly and put themselves together a winner if somebody wants to go in there and see that team win right away? Maybe you get one team that's aggressive and tries to win right away. Maybe you get another team that gets some executives from the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers and a series of teams that want to build the team through the farm, through its analytics. Build a great farm system and have a great team for the next series of years, as opposed to try to build a winner right now. We'll see. But the Vegas Golden Knights have a chance to do something that we may never see again in sports history, something we have never seen in the history of professional sports. And that's an expansion team come in and win the entire thing. And I'll tell you, what we see this year is going to have a very good and very big factor and very big determination on what we see when Major League Baseball decides to expand in the next couple of years. Maybe we get expansion in 2020. Maybe we get expansion in baseball in 2022. But I'll tell you, there's going to be somebody from an ownership perspective, from a front office perspective, that's going to try to build this thing on the fly. And they're going to try to build this thing on the fly because the Las Vegas Golden Knights did it in the National Hockey League. And they've made it to a conference finals which is something that no expansion team has ever done in the history of professional sports. The question is, how far are they going to go? Are they going to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals? Do they make it to the Stanley Cup Finals? Do they have a chance to beat a Tampa Bay, who obviously has a pretty good team? You got the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins about to finish off that series. Will Washington finally get over the hump to beat that mighty Penguin team that kicks their ass every single time in the postseason? But I'm intrigued because I think this Vegas Golden Knight team, by the way, may be playing the second best team out of that other bracket, because the Nashville Predators looked like they were the best team in that conference. They're pretty close to getting knocked off. And if they do, it's a pretty good chance the Vegas Golden Knights are going to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. Once again, John Pielli, Pass Ball Show, happy to be with you. Talked a little bit about what has happened to Monday Night Football. And the fact that Monday Night Football is not a big deal anymore because it doesn't have that dynamic broadcasting team. Doesn't have a Howard Cosell. Doesn't have that person that's on that broadcast team that you want to listen to because you know he's going to say something crazy and you just want to know what it is you're going to say next. The New York Mets, whose front office, ran by Sandy Alderson, needs to get something together right now. And it's on him to do something with this roster and show a sense of urgency. The NBA, where we were told by talking heads for months how the game had progressed and it balanced out. There was more parity in the NBA. The playoffs this year were something worth watching. And after the first round, which you saw a series of games go down to the wire, teams that were supposed to win were challenged by the underdog down to the last game. You're seeing more of the same in the NBA. And the Vegas Golden Knights, I'll tell you, if they can find a way to win the Stanley Cup, they're going to impact the future of expansion in professional sports for years upon years. Whether it happens again in the NHL, whether it happens in Major League Baseball when they eventually expand, which I hate to say it, whether you're in favor of expansion or you hate expansion, it's happening. Major League Baseball is going to 32 teams. And I'll tell you, one of these two teams that are coming in Major League Baseball are going to take a chip from the Las Vegas Golden Knights and say, I'm going to build a team on the fly and try to win a World Series the first year. Because the Vegas Golden Knights tried to win a Stanley Cup in their first year. Last thing I want to mention in regards to Monday Night Football, and I don't know if anybody has suggested this, but I tell you, ESPN has a chance because of their dynamic personalities that they have on that network to put somebody in on their Monday night broadcast that's going to draw some attention. That's going to have that it factor. That's going to have that ability to go out there on the microphone and talk about football, but the fans are going to know. I want to tune into this guy because I don't know what he's going to say next. They have them on their roster already. And if ESPN was smart and wanted to bring somebody onto their broadcast that's going to have that it factor, that's going to give the listeners and the viewers a little bit of perspective and to think that, man, at any given moment, this guy is going to say something. I want to know what he's going to say. ESPN would be smart to bring in Stephen A. Smith. And whether you like Stephen A. Smith or you hate Stephen A. Smith, the guy is ridiculously talented. He has that it factor. And you know, whenever he goes on to speak, you want to be in tune to what the guy is going to say, whether you like him or hate him, because you want to know what he's going to say next. And if ESPN wants to bring Monday Night Football back to the prominence of what it was with Frank Gifford and Don Meredith and Howard Cosell, or even where it was with Gifford and Al Michaels and Dan Dierdorf, they would put Stephen A. Smith on their broadcast team, and they would do it right now. They're in a little bit of a transition. They can't quite find that great dynamic broadcasting team. They want to make it a three-man booth, which is fine. I got no issue with that. Bring Stephen A. Smith in and make him be part of it. And if ESPN knew what it was doing they would have done it yesterday. Last thing I want to get into, and I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about this. Before that, after that, we'll finish the program up. Be back with you tomorrow, same time, 6 to 7 p.m. Periscope, Facebook Live, and on demand on YouTube. Passball Show is about baseball, sports, and unifying America. And probably because nobody's listened, we've not taken any strides to unify ourselves as a country in the United States. And I'll save this for the last segment of the show because I know the majority of my listeners are listening to hear me talk about sports. So if this is the first time you're listening to the program and you listen to my recap of the things I spoke about in sports, you can turn the broadcast off right now. The United States, as it exists right now, is blessed with everything that the world is blessed with. Blessed with technology. Everything's at the tip of your fingers. We're supposed to be growing. We're supposed to not only be growing as a country, but growing as a world. And the problem is you got people that can't seem to get out of their own way. Everybody says, hey, this is my opinion. And may even preface what they're saying by saying that this is my opinion. But then go blast and yell and scream and curse and, disparage everybody else that doesn't have the same opinion that they have. And I'll get into this once again because the United States of America for 200 years, well over 200 years, has been successful. And Audie, I'll subscribe to your channel after this program. How about that? How about you subscribe to mine? John Pielli. Subscribe to me, I'll subscribe to you. The United States as it exists right now is at each other's throats. What has worked for this country, the fact that it is the most diverse and it's not a cookie cutter, it's not a carbon copy of every other nation. It's a bunch of people that are set up amongst itself to be different. And that's the reason they've succeeded. Has now all of a sudden decided to get away from it. Has decided to be a nation of hundreds of millions of individuals. And has forgotten that it has succeeded for well over 200 years. Because it was unified. It understood each other's differences. And now all of a sudden, it's my difference is bigger than anybody else's difference. So I'm gonna sit here and hang with only my people. People that share the same things that I share. And try to coexist amongst my little group in a nation of millions and millions of people who are all different. It's becoming a hypocrisy. It's becoming the very evil of what it was created to not be. It's all it is now. It's a divided subgroup of different people in different groups that want to segregate themselves. They want to be amongst their own people. And don't want to unify. Don't want to associate themselves with anybody else that's not them. Wants to sit there with their own ideals and their own beliefs and say, this has got to be the only way. And is going to segregate themselves from everybody that's different than them. And they're going to say that my little group is better than all these other little groups that exist in this country. And I'll tell you this, America, if you don't open your mind up to everybody else that's not you, and don't try to coexist with people that don't have the same ideals that you have, and don't have the same beliefs that you have, you're going to watch the country self-destruct. 200 plus years of the great United States of America is going to crumble just like the Ottoman Empire. It's just going to crumble like ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And when we look back years upon years from now, and we're teaching American history about that old empire that used to exist, the United States of America, We can talk about the days that it crumbled. We can talk about the days that it was destroyed down to nothing. We can talk about how it destroyed itself like the Ottoman Empire and the Greeks and Rome. The thing that all those great nations had in common is the fact that they all self-destructed. And I had a great history teacher that taught me those that don't remember their past are doomed to repeat it. Look in the mirror, America, at all the other history of all these great empires that existed before you. What do they all have in common? They all self-destructed because they all became selfish. They all became about their own individual ideals and cared more about that than the unity of the nation that existed to make it what became successful. So I don't care if anybody's listening to this. Maybe someday after I'm dead and buried, people will replay this and remind itself what this country had to do at some point to keep itself from destruction. And I mean self-destruction. Quick recap once again. Passball show today. Divided States of America. Monday Night Football. Bring in Stephen A. Smith. Bring in somebody that's got some personality. Somebody out there that is going to make you as the viewer and the listener say, what is this guy going to say next? The Mets. It's up for Sandy Alderson to do something with his 25-man roster, and if he doesn't do it, he should pay for it with his own job. The NBA playoffs, all the hype about this new group of teams that we're going to see something out of. What are we looking at right now? Same old NBA playoffs, Warriors, and either Cavs or the Celtics. And the Vegas Golden Knights. Let me end the show today with a happy story. That expansion team, the team that didn't exist before this year, coming at you. A chance to win the Stanley Cup in his first year. And the impact it's going to have on future expansion in Major League Baseball. You can catch the entire program on demand on YouTube, or of course on Periscope or Facebook Live. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m. This is the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. God bless you, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.